with the Office of the Tenant Advocate. Welcome to the Preparing for Emergency workshop. Let me introduce you, Mr. Edgar Alvear. Mr. Alvear is an immigrant from Ecuador. In 1965, he came to the U.S. with a parents, D.C. resident since 1965. He joined the D.C. Fire Department in 1989. Mr. Edgar.
Good afternoon, folks, and thank you for inviting us here. And I would like to thank everyone for being here in this roundtable type discussion. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is fire safety, fire evacuation. Fire evacuation is something we should not think about at time of incident. This is something that should be prepared, it should be thought about, it should be pre-planned. For those of us who are living single, guess what? The only responsibility I have is for me, myself, and I. Now, for those of us who have family, children, pets, who does what, where do we go, and where do we meet? Part of the problem, like I said, at 3 o'clock in the morning is not the time to be thinking, where are we supposed to meet? Where am I supposed to go? And how am I going to get out of my place? Remember that. I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence, but in case of emergency, remember my name, my telephone number, where do I live, especially when I'm talking to the operator at the 911 station. Because every bit of information that you're giving that person is crucial information. Well, you're going to say, well, they have my information. Well, I'm talking from a cell phone. Is that cell phone being registered in case you have a hang-up? Will they be able to contact you back? So that's why my name is Edgar Alvear. My telephone number is whatever I live at, and the issue that I'm having is I'm on the 7th floor, 5th floor, there's smoke in my apartment, there's smoke in my building. For those of us who are mobility impaired, i.e. walkers, strollers, or in a wheelchair, that is the most crucial information that I need to be giving someone. Because if I cannot get out of my apartment, because remember, I cannot use the elevator. If my apartment has an elevator, elevator is not useful to anyone. Where's my stairs? How far is my stairs? Where is my next set of stairs? Remember, we are creatures of habits. I come into my apartment, I go through the same door, I check my mail, I go through the elevator, push the same button I always pushed for the last few years, walk so many steps to my apartment. Tomorrow morning when I wake up, I do it all in reverse. 3 o'clock in the morning, hey, I need to use a stairwell. How far is my stairwell? Where is my stairwell? Where are my pull stations? Those are things that we need to start thinking about, not at 3 in the morning like I suggest. Something that you should be thoroughly familiar with your building. Like I tell people, your building, not mine. Your home, not mine.
6A, B, and C? And that's me over there?
Yes, that's you over here. Hi, Paul. So like I was saying, you should know your building. You should know your home. How many of us here live in apartment buildings? High-rise buildings, mid-rise buildings? What I want you to start thinking about, if from my door should be X amount of feet to my primary stairwell, how far is my secondary stairwell? Or where is my secondary means of egress? Because your primary might not be always accessible. Okay? For those of us who have children, for those who have loved ones, the time is not like, again, 3 in the morning to think about it. One of these days, while it's still fresh in your mind, let's sit at the dinner table after we eat dinner. In case of fire, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is how we're going to get out, and this is where we're going to meet. And people, please, 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 do not tell anyone down the street. Because down the street to me means over there when you thought it was over there. Too many times I hear on the news, parent, father, mother, someone, loved one, perish while looking for someone in the house. Or a firefighter was sent to look for someone when that person is down the street. So when we make our plans, let's be site-specific, away from the building, away from the apartment, across the street, somewhere safe. Last thing I want you to do is be a victim of a fire truck or a hose in pursuit of trying to put this fire out. You're standing where we're going to do harm when we're supposed to be doing more help than harm. Does that make sense? Away from the building. Like I said, or if I can't get out of my building, again, 911. My name is, my address is, my telephone number is, and this is the reason why I'm calling you. In case of fire, in case this building was on fire, or this room was on fire, fire has to rise, smoke has to rise. At some point in time, smoke goes all the way to the ceiling. It starts to go down. And the heat above is superheated versus down here where I'm at, down there on the floor. It's a lot cooler. That's why we always tell you get down on the ground. If you have to get out, you're not going to walk. This is not Hollywood where we see two people fighting in the fire. Trust me, that doesn't happen. Nor do people walk like if they're going to the door. No, we're down on the ground. Even firefighters are down on the ground. Because the lower you are, the cooler it is. Trust me, it's a way of a difference. Because remember, we firefighters, we're wearing protective gear. Civilians in homes, civilians in apartments, all you have is a shirt on your back. 3 o'clock in the morning, there are some times that you don't have the shirt on your back. And we can testify to that one. Okay. Prepare yourself. I'm not trying to preach doom. I'm not trying to say evil things about it. I'm trying to explain to you preparedness, a cool, level head. Because how many of us are parents here? Grandparents or anyone like that? Now, let me ask you a question. How old is your child, ma'am?
My youngest one is 25.
Okay, how many we have younger than 25? Like in our 12 age or... Let me ask you a question. If mom is totally losing control because she's panicking, what do you think that 10 or 12-year-old is going to be doing? Mom, dad, uncle, grandmother, whomever, needs to be the rock, needs to be focused. I don't care how scared you are inside, but on the exterior, you're going to show no fear. Because that child, that person is looking up to you for some type of guidance. Calm, cool, collective, know what to do, know who to call, and know where to meet. Thank you.
All right. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a section for questions. So our next panelist is Mr. Paul Carden. He's a Regional Disaster Program Official with the American Red Cross.
All right, my turn. Thank you much, folks. Sorry about the delay. Been working with, not you this time, but the other parts of the city dealing with responding to the fire that was a week ago, down in Southeast, that senior building fire. So the Red Cross message is something very simple. It involves 3 steps, 3 broad brush steps. I like to begin the conversation with, to be prepared for disaster does not require you to go onto the black market, go to some secret place, or do anything very strange. Disaster preparedness, being ready, is very, very simple. So the first thing we want you to do is have a plan. Fire department's done a great job about talking about a plan for a house fire. That's very important. I actually happen to have a checklist for being prepared for a fire. But we want you to be prepared for other disasters. I happen to have a checklist for probably 2 of the most common disasters in DC that you'll face. You know what the first one is? Fire? Nope. Well, yes, but no. Power outage. Power outages happen all the time, okay? Shaking your heads up. How many times has your house electric got off? None? You've been lucky?
Not too long.
Okay, but from where I sit at, it happens a fair amount in total throughout the National Capital Region and everywhere. You know, it's a power outage for a couple hours. Power outages are very common, what we call cascade or follow-on event from just about every disaster. Even a snowstorm, beyond the traffic mayhem, power will go out in isolated areas. I have another checklist on thunderstorms. Power is always going out after a thunderstorm, a wind event. Yet when you start moving up that scale to higher level events, bigger, more sexier events, tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, power outage is a very common occurrence or a very common disaster that we face. So we've got a checklist that helps you deal with that. We'll pass them out at the end of the class. So how to be ready for a power outage. So have a plan. So beyond having a plan on how you're going to deal with this event, part of having a plan is, as you've said, where am I going to go after a disaster? If the disaster causes me to leave my home, where am I going to go and where's my family going to go that we can meet and rally? For fire, it's like just across the street, look for the fire trucks. It will be somewhere close. But if our community gets flooded, where are we going to go? So it's those basic things to, as you've said, sit down now, think about it, think about what I'm going to do, and how am I going to inform my family about that. So that's having a plan. We've got some guidance for a plan. The next thing is to have a kit. And here's where I talk about it is not something that you have to go to a black market or to a secret website. A kit is basic stuff. It is stuff that you use day to day that you've just put in a small bag, a small box, you've put near your door so if you have to escape, except for in a fire, you can grab it and run. So the first thing we say is have in that kit food that you would like, food that you would eat. I have to tell you folks, you've seen those survivalist bars. They're like a brownish bar. You haven't seen them? You're lucky. No matter what you do to it, whether you put hot sauce on it, ketchup on it, syrup on it, it is still a brown, hard bar. So buy something that you like, fruit cocktail, fruit stuff. You can now buy, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, the choice between tuna was with water, with oil. Okay, that was the extent, and I'm not that old. You can now get packs of tuna that have flavor in it. You can now buy packs of tuna that have mayonnaise, have relish, have crackers. I've even seen packs of tuna that come with a breath mint at the end, I guess to top off the meal. So what we're saying is you're just, for your kit from when it comes to food, you're just buying items, putting aside that you would All right. I actually like tuna, so I have tuna a lot. I really jazz it up. But it's just canned stuff. It's just packs of food that you would normally eat. I have to tell you, what is the largest, highest volume product that Walmart pushes into its stores when a hurricane's hitting or aimed at the Gulf Coast? Huh? Water, yeah. Their big item is Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarts, if you got a kid, scrape the sugar off and you can give it to the kid. So it's a when you think about it, it's something basic that's got some bulk to it, that's wrapped up individually, that you can eat Pop-Tarts. If it's between eating nothing and having something, you can eat a Pop-Tart 24/7, and you can even eat it untoasted. So that's what we're talking about when you put that kit together for food. It's stuff that you like. How many folks like chocolate? Guess what I have in my kit? I have chocolate. I do. And I have crackers, and okay. And you know, the old adage is, hot sauce makes everything taste good. So I even have a small containers of hot sauce. I don't know, you don't like hot sauce, but okay. So hot sauce will make everything taste good. End of the day, put stuff that doesn't require refrigeration, doesn't require to be cooked, requires little or no water in your kit. The beauty of that kit, if you've got kids, every 6 months, every year, you can, quote, have a disaster party. If you've got kids, take the stuff out of the kits. We're pretending we're going to a disaster today, and we're going to eat the disaster food, but replace it first. So food is a component of it. Next component of it is an AM, FM, radio, battery-powered, crank-powered, whatever it is, but have a radio. The internet will eventually fail. The internet takes electricity. I must admit, I have an internet phone, so I'll lose all communications because, you know, the internet requires a lot of electricity to run. Hardwire. Cell towers will be down, so I'm at a disadvantage. Maybe I'll get my wife to let me put in an old school copper phone one day. So the AM, FM radio, battery powered, extra batteries, hand cranks are good. You can also buy now AM, FM radios with a light, with a crank, so that you can crank it, and while listening to the news, you can charge your cell phone or other things. So food, information, radio, battery-powered, hand-cranked, light glow sticks, flashlights with extra batteries, crank lights with extra batteries. Nowhere will we mention the M word or the C word. Matches and candles, correct. Yeah, no matches, no candles. I cringe when someone says that. So food, communication, lights, water. We say a gallon of water per day per person. That's at the high end of the survival thing. Several bottles of water per day for persons will work. I would offer that while it looks great in survival, is I'm holding a 2.5 gallon container of water. 2.5 gallon container of water weighs roughly 18, he's better at math than I. So we're suggesting smaller bottles of water. Also, if I break this 2.5 gallon bottle container of water, I've lost all my water. So we're just saying bottled water. So food, lights, communications, water, personal toiletry stuff, toilet paper, toothbrush, toothpaste, all those good things. Wipes are great in time of disaster. There's a toss-up between antibacterial soaps, Perels, things of that nature, but you should have some soap that you could use a little bit of water, because at the end of the day, that cleans better than waterless soap, Perel and things of that nature. You also want a change or two of clothing in that kit, because you're going to be out working. Toss-up, you either want a hard copy or a photostatic copy, i.e. a scanned copy of important documents. I would go for both in my kit. I would have a list of all my credit cards, the phone number and stuff like that, so that if I lose them, if I need to get back in touch with folks, if I don't have my wallet, I've got that available. I would also have copies of important papers. I would imagine in Louisiana, the untold disaster was court records that were lost in parishes, deeds, things of that nature. So I would have, if you can, a hard copy of my house deed and a scanned copy of my house deed. Virginia is going to now what's called a secure ID. Does DC have a secure ID yet or not? Okay, so what does that mean to me? It means you need to have a copy. I'm not being sexist, but if you're a female, I would have a copy of everything from my birth certificate, my marriage license, my divorce paperwork, and my new marriage license. I had to do that for my wife in New Jersey, not in time of disaster, but she had gotten a divorce. I don't know how, she married me, and she was getting her driver's license in Virginia. I had to go and collect all those items for her to get a New Jersey driver's license. So what I'm saying is papers are more important than just the stuff that we think of. Birth certificates, marriage license, divorce decree, stuff like that you're going to need after a disaster. Prescriptions, at least a 3-day supply of what you take. I also suggest that you put in your kit copies of your prescriptions, either a scanned and or a hard copy. The reason I say both is there's no guarantee that your pharmacist is going to have enough electricity or be able to look at your documents, or if it's an old document, will it be formatted the same way? So a copy in both ways. Your prescriptions, copies of your actual prescriptions, so here's another. Anyone ever see the movie Roadhouse? No? It's, I forget, what's his name? He plays a bouncer going to different roadhouses, keeping control. And so when he'd go into the doctor's office after getting beat up to get stitches, he'd walk in with a copy of his x-rays and all his medical records. Yes. Yeah, Patrick Swayze. So I even do that line on doctors sometime and they look at me like I'm crazy. But I actually have a file folder in my safety box with my illnesses. I don't have that many, none are mental. But my illnesses, the doctors I've had, and my prescriptions and stuff, so that if I have to flee my home and I end up in Montana and now need to establish a relationship with a new doctor, I'm ready to go. So, I mean, that's something important to keep in mind. How many folks have pets? Okay. Have a box of the food they eat, dried and wet. How many people have cats? Bring litter. Have a backup kitty litter box. Throw a few toys. Oh, then children. I'm sorry, cats, then children. Have stuff for your kids in that thing. Their formulas, a new play toy, stuff to keep them occupied. So that's what we're talking about, a kit there. Nothing strange, nothing exotic, but just stuff to have. Next thing is to stay informed. How many people live in DC? I work in DC. How many people are aware of a thing called DC Alert? DC Alert. You can go to HSEMA, that's Homeland Security Emergency Management for DC, or just Google in DC Alert, and you can get notifications about what's happening in the district. The beauty of this thing is that I like to call it sensitivity, but you can say, just tell me about what's happening in my neighborhood or this neighborhood, or tell me what's happening in the entire district. So the beauty of that, it's a wireless base, comes across a device like this. Yeah, that's a iPhone 6. The battery dies early every day on me. I didn't say that out loud. But have that type of thing. You can get text messages, stuff like that, so that you can stay informed, stay what's going on. So the first thing is stay stay informed, have a way of getting information, know what the disaster impact's going to be. And then that's pretty much it. I'll give you some handouts. The hardest part about this, what I've just talked about, is the biggest challenge in life. And the biggest challenge in life is discipline. I have to be honest, I didn't have a kit until I was out doing presentations a few years ago, and I go, oh man, I better have a kit because at some presentation, someone's gonna ask me, what's your kit look like? Of course, my kit will require my wife and 6 people to take all the boxes out because I went overboard. But still, something simple, something basic, stuff that you have around the house, buy it, put it away, rotate it out. You can control it, but you've got to take the time to be disciplined. And then I'll throw in one other plug for our friends in the fire department. Have a smoke alarm, 10-year lithium, and get a CO detector type alarm too. Because even these big exotic disasters will start out sometimes as something as simple as a house fire. Okay, I am done, sir. Thank you all for the time.
Sure. I'm going to help you with the handouts.
Yes.
As soon as you finish. Yeah, no
Yep.
problem.
Could I say one thing that you totally forgot about? Backup money.
Oh, yes. Well, I was going to,
You and I work together, so I.
Yes.
Backup money.
so.
Couple checks.
Yep, couple checks, but here's a certain reality. We've both been to enough disasters. I spent time in Puerto Rico for 5 weeks in Puerto Rico after the impact. Lines were like started at 8 o'clock in the morning and lasted until whenever, until they could load enough cash into the machines, and then people would come take it up. So you want to have bills. I would offer maybe 1 or 2 big bills, but a lot of small bills so that you can do simple transactions. You know, however much you think you can put in your little fireproof case, put cash. You're right. Yeah, I was in I went to Puerto Rico and I had to pull out $800 worth of cash on my company card because we didn't know if I was going to be able to, any of us would be able to do that. Yep.
Well, we're going to have a section for questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to have one more.
This is an observation
You-
for banks, are generally not waterproof.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't know that, and therefore, if you have critical papers or documents, we should suggest not only something that you might keep at home, but also make a copy. And if you have friends, relatives that are quite far away from your target area, do that, because without that,
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Our next panelist is Mr. Wayne McAlwin. Currently, he serves as a 3rd Executive Director for the District of Columbia Insurance Federation. Mr. McAlwin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I must say that I have been very impressed by the first 2 presentations, and one of the things I'm going to do when I go home is think about everything that should be in my kit. So, you know, we're constantly learning every day. After the disaster, after the fire, after the windstorm, whatever, you're going to come back to your house eventually. And one of the things, hopefully, that's going to put you back where you were prior to this incident is insurance, if you have it. So I'm here to talk about renter's insurance, what it is, who gets it, how do you get it, why you should have it, and what it will do for you, and what it will not do for you. So first of all, let's talk about just a couple of boring statistics. Who rents in the United States? You realize that 1/3 of the households in the United States are rented households. 2/3 are owned units. 1/3 are rented units. And people rent in a variety of circumstances. They might rent a single-family house. They might rent in a high-rise building, 5 or more units. They might rent in 2 or 4 units. The most prevalent structure for renters is the high-rise, 5 or more units, and that accounts for almost half of the rental units in the United States. Who rents in terms of demographics? People under 30 account for about 22% of the renters. People over 65, like me, account for 14% of the renters. And somewhere in the middle, 30 to 44, 45 to 64 account for about 65% of the renters. Now, when we think about renting, we think about renting an apartment or renting a house. But you know, if you go to a hotel, if you take a trip, you're a renter, right? You may be a renter for one night, but you're a renter. And how is the stuff in your room protected? Well, it's protected by a renter's policy. If you have a renter's policy on the unit that you live in, you have a certain amount of coverage away from the premises. And so that coverage follows you to a certain extent. You also have in a renter's policy liability insurance. That's to take care of your personal responsibility. If you rented a single-family house, for example, and you're out mowing the lawn and you chip a rock out to the sidewalk and it takes somebody's eye out, that's personal responsibility. That's a liability claim. And the insurance policy, the liability coverage on the insurance policy would cover that. But let's suppose you're away from your apartment, you're somewhere else, and something happens, and it's your responsibility. That liability coverage follows you, and it will protect you. So renter's insurance really can do a lot for folks. People say, well, I can't really afford renter's insurance. It's too expensive. But an average policy for renters in the District of Columbia would cost somewhere between $15 and $30 a month. It depends on the kind of coverage you have. It would depend upon the structure you live in. Steel and brick buildings are more secure than a wooden structure, for example, and so the company might want a little higher price if you live in a wooden structure. They might want a little higher price if you live much farther away from fire protection, if there isn't a fire hydrant within a block or two of where you live, so that the fire can get addressed as quickly as possible. And so construction has a lot to do with it. Also, housekeeping has something to do with it. If you leave oily rags in a corner and they smolder and eventually cause a fire, fortunately you have a fire insurance policy where you have a peril of fire. The rags are the hazard, and so you would have coverage. You would be covered for that. We think of, again, renting in terms of apartment houses or renting maybe a single-family house. But there's also now what the industry calls P, the letter P, the number 2 and the letter P, P2P rentals. And those P's stand for peer, peer-to-peer. One of the most popular ones is Airbnb. And if you've heard of Airbnb, by the way, if you're ever on Jeopardy, I'm going to give you the answer to the final Jeopardy question, and I expect that you will share with me if you get it right. But the origin of Airbnb, does anybody know what the origin is? I'm going to tell you what it is. It's very interesting. It was 2 young men in San Francisco that were out of work, and there was a big convention coming into town. Most of the hotels had been taken, and so they decided to put an ad in the paper to say, we will give you an air mattress and breakfast. And so initially it was called Air Mattress Bed and Breakfast. Then it became Air Mattress B&B, and then it became Airbnb, and they decided they had something worthwhile, and they put it together, and 9 years ago it became a viable company. And so that's the genesis of Airbnb. I bring it up because if you ever take advantage of Airbnb or you make your unit available, you're going to go away, somebody wants to come into town, this is a region that's very popular, and lots of people come in as tourists, want to come in for a couple of days, see the museums, the inauguration, whatever, and so you decide to put your property out. Those people better have insurance. They better have insurance in their own unit, so that if something happens while they're renting yours, or if something happens while you're renting an Airbnb, you want to make sure you have renter's insurance, because that will help to protect you. Other rental situations that people don't think about, your child is away at school, maybe a dormitory, they're a renter. You become a senior citizen and you move from a house into an assisted living facility, you're a renter. So renters are come in all kinds of varieties. We're talking generally in terms of renter's insurance. The focus really is the contents coverage. And of course, the amount of coverage that you have is strictly up to you. But let's say you have $10,000 worth of household goods and contents that you want to cover. And then you have this little box that you've been told you should have some money in because of an emergency. Well, the most money that can be protected in a renter's insurance policy is $200. So if that box has more than $200 in it, that's all you're going to get back from the insurance company. So the insurance company recognizes that people have possessions that are more valuable than ordinary household goods. Maybe you have an engagement ring, maybe you have a watch that somebody gave you, some kind of brooch that your grandmother left you, whatever, something of value. Those items of value can be scheduled. These are called floaters, personal article floater, and that coverage can be enhanced. It can be greater than the normal contents coverage. There's also an advantage because on a floater, if you've lost the possession, you've lost the watch, the brooch, it's often covered for that circumstance as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be stolen. You drop your ring down the garbage disposal, it would be covered. So those kinds of things are important to note. There are a couple of different forms of renter's insurance. There's a named perils form where you look at the policy and it tells you exactly what you're insured against: fire, wind, and so forth. You're never insured for flood. You know why? Because the disaster potential for flood is so great that insurance companies feel that they just cannot absorb it. And so many years ago, the federal government put a program together. It's the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA, and FEMA now is in charge of the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, and you can purchase flood insurance from the NFIP. Often you can get it through your insurance agent. Sometimes you can actually get it through the insurance company that you're doing business with, which sometimes confuses people because they think they're getting the flood insurance from that company. But that company is just a conduit for a federal program. Federal program is an excellent program, and if you are on the map, there are flood maps that show places where there is a greater potential for a flood hazard. If you happen to be in that hazard zone, then you should have a flood policy. One of the problems, and Mr. Cardin brought up the Louisiana situation when we had Katrina, one of the problems that those residents had was that many of those residencies were generationally passed on. In other words, grandma or great-grandma originally bought the house and had a mortgage. And by the time you're living in it, the mortgage had been paid off. And so there was no bank that was saying you must have flood insurance because you live in the shadow of Lake Pontchartrain and your property is actually lower than the level of the lake, which is crazy, but that is in fact the case. And so with nobody pushing people to buy flood insurance, there were many people, most people didn't have flood insurance. And so you want to be very vigilant of that. There are certain wards of the city that are more prone to flood. We saw that when Sandy came, and actually I did some seminars on flood insurance in Ward 5 and some other wards of the city to educate residents in terms of how to get flood insurance and that your renter's or homeowner's insurance does not cover that hazard. So one of the things that, the other thing to consider when you purchase a renter's policy is the difference between what's called ACV, or actual cash value, and replacement costs. And you want to try to get a policy that focuses on replacement cost coverage, meaning when something happens to your stuff, you will get insurance based on the replacement cost of the goods. Actual cash value takes into account depreciation. So there's a formula, and depreciated value is subtracted. And so you would end up not getting as much money, and perhaps not enough money, probably in most cases, to replace whatever those possessions are if it's on an actual cash value. many people buy actual cash value because it's cheaper. Replacement cost is a little bit more expensive, but most companies offer replacement cost, and it isn't that much more expensive relative to the angst that you have at the end of, when you have a fire or some loss and you're trying to replace your possessions. Some of the things that people don't think about when they think about scheduling specific items of value. I talked about jewelry and fine arts, things like that. But, if you're a fisherman, you have fishing gear. If you're a sportsman, you have bicycles and things like that that are valuable, cameras, things that would have musical instruments. Your child is a prodigy and plays the violin, and it's very expensive, whatever. Those kinds of things need to be scheduled. One of the things that you can do if you are interested in comparing rates for renters insurance. There are many companies in the District of Columbia that make a market and will sell renters insurance. So the market is very vibrant. There's a lot of competition, which means there's good pricing. And one of the things you can do is go on the website of the Department of Insurance. And the Department of Insurance is known as the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, DISB, and their website is found at disb.dc.gov. And on that website, you'll find a lot of the information that I just gave you, as well as you will find a comparison of rates. You can find that comparison for automobile insurance, you can find it for renters insurance, and it will have a number of companies' rates, and you can look at what it would be for certain valuations. And so the last thing I would say is if anyone has a business pursuit, you have an apartment or you rent a single-family house and you have some kind of a business that you're operating, you have very limited coverage for business pursuits on the standard policy, and you have to be aware that if you have that circumstance that you should buy extra coverage for business pursuits and the kind of equipment that you might have in a business. Of course, if your business pursuit is a dental office or something like that, clearly you're going to have a special policy for that. But some people have a home business that has electronic equipment in it that can be very pricey, and that kind of thing should be considered. So that's about it.
Okay, this is the moment for questions for our panelists. Do you have any questions?
Yes. No. You would read in your policy, it would be in one of the insuring agreements, and it would say that you would pick an amount for coverage C, which is for contents, and then the policy will say you have a percentage of that amount available away from the premises. And that would include not only in a hotel, but when you're on vacation. It would also include in your car. If your car, many people don't realize that if your car is parked outside and it's broken into and something is stolen out of your car, many people think, well, that must be car insurance, but it isn't. It's homeowners insurance or renters insurance, because that's where your stuff is being protected. So it's typically, for some companies it's 10% away, for others it's 20%. It depends on the company. Yeah. Also, if you have a deductible, it would be subject to the deductible as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, is this the Department of Insurance?
Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, DISB. This is a department that is responsible for financial services protections in the district. So they oversee banking, securities, and insurance, so they call it the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking, DISB, and the website is disb.dc, District of Columbia, .gov, G-O-V. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that?
What was your question, ma'am?
Is the information.
Or is the information is on the page?
I do not, no, that was not my handout. That's the disaster handout. I did not have a handout. I'm the handout. Yes.
You have to take the pictures and let them know or something?
That's a very good idea. That's an excellent point that you raise. Let's say you have a certain amount of value of contents. Oftentimes, in the old days, and I often use that expression when I'm talking to people because I was around in the old days. I was first
I
got
was
into the
too.
insurance business in, are you ready? 1968. So it's been 50 years that I've been in this business. And it used to be we would tell people to write down what you had. We also used to tell people to scratch your Social Security number on the back of everything valuable. Your television, your radio, wasn't that crazy? And so now all those people have to go around and scrape it off. But now, of course, if you can video this stuff. If you have a phone, you can do a video or you can take shots, camera shots of it. And that's a very good thing to have because it documents exactly what you have and the condition of what you have. And so it might forestall a conversation about, you have a sofa that's a certain number of years old, but it looks brand new, right? And so having photos to document your possession is an excellent idea. Thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that.
Oh, you're welcome. Another question. Are you familiar with United Insurance, rental insurance?
United Rental?
United American, is that American?
I'm not. Is that a company?
Yes, United Insurance Company of America.
I'm not, but I will say, I wasn't here to represent any particular company or to promote anybody or to even unpromote somebody. So
Right.
my discussion is very generic.
Okay.
But if you have a complaint, if you feel that you have an insurance company that has not been serving you well, DISB has a consumer advocate. And you can contact DISB, the Department of Insurance, and they have a staff of people who will look after that issue and call the insurance company and find out for you. One of the people that years ago, one of the people who was in the Consumer Advocacy Department was Yvette Alexander, and she ultimately ran and was elected to the council for Ward 7. She's currently not a council member, but prior to being a council member, that is what she did. She was a consumer advocate for the insurance department, and that's where you would go.
I see.
Location or a generic type of location for one to look. Like go to the web and see what are the relative ratings, definition of bureau, things of that nature to check on the health of particular insurance company.
You can do that yourself, but DISB does that, of course. The Department of Insurance, really, a regulator in any state has two customers. On the one hand, they protect the customers that are buying insurance, the insurance buying public. And they're protecting them against rates that are too unfairly discriminatory or too high, or those kinds of things. On the other hand, they have another customer. The other customer is the insurance companies themselves, and they are responsible for protecting the insurance companies from themselves, so that, insurance is a promise to pay. And so if an insurance company came along and they started to say, well, you know what, we'd like to write 50% of the insurance in the District of Columbia, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to sell renters insurance for half as much as anybody else. Well, in a couple of years, what do you suppose would happen? They wouldn't be around, right? So they wouldn't be able to keep the promise. So the insurance regulators, insurance department is responsible for the financial health of an insurance company as well as protecting consumers. And you can see that when you go to DISB, that what their view is of certain companies and so forth. But you can also go, there's an organization called BEST, B-E-S-T, and BEST reports. BEST is an organization that actually audits the financial health of insurance companies, and they rate them. If they're particularly healthy, they might get an A+ rating. If they're good, they might get a B rating, and so forth. So it depends on what kind of money they have in the bank and what kind of exposure they have. If it's an insurance company that just writes people who work in an office, they might have one rating. If it's an insurance company that writes loggers climbing trees and chopping them down in Oregon, it might have quite a different rating because the hazard is much greater.
You want to talk about additional living expenses, particularly on a renter's policy?
Yes, yeah.
No,
Oh, do I want to talk? Sure. Yeah,
What do you talk about?
that's a very good point. Additional living expense, that's one of the coverage that you get. That's coverage D on a renter's policy. And additional living expense is just what it sounds like. You have a fire, you have to leave your apartment while it's being fixed, and you have to rent a hotel room or another apartment for some period of time, and the insurance will pay the additional living expense. And that is the key. The key word is additional. So it's saying that if you have expenses above and beyond what you would have had, then this is what we're going to pay for your living, your additional living expenses while the claim is being resolved. One of the keys, though, is that it must be a claim that's covered on the policy. So if it's a fire and you have fire insurance, then the additional living expense will respond. There's one other coverage on a renter's policy that I didn't mention, and that is coverage F, which is medical insurance. Should be coverage M, but it's F. Medical insurance is a no-fault coverage. It's one of those coverages where you might have a $500 or $1,000 worth of medical expense, and what it says is you have a guest in your house, and you're having a dinner, you're paring apples, and the guest slices his finger and needs a couple of stitches. So you run to the doc in the box, and the person gets stitched up, and you can say to that person, don't worry about it, my insurance company is going to take care of that. And the reason insurance companies put that in the policy is because it prevents people from having to sue. And so if you had to sue to get a couple of stitches, think of how much more expensive that would be. You'd have lawyers and all kinds of other things. So medical insurance is no-fault insurance, and it's an excellent coverage. It's, by the way, a coverage on your automobile policy as well, and it's very handy to have. Well, many people refer to it as goodwill coverage because it forestalls any kind of argument.
Okay, my question is, I live in a high-rise apartment building, and I do have renter's insurance. But my question is this: let's say, God forbid, a fire breaks out in my apartment, but my apartment is not affected by the fire. My apartment is affected by not only the water damage, but the smoke damage too. Will my insurance policy pay for that? I mean, will I be compensated for that if
Yeah.
I have fire insurance? If I have a renter's insurance for my apartment?
Yeah. Typically, a renter's insurance policy covers fire and smoke, and oftentimes the damage from a fire is not burning up everything, but sometimes it's the water damage from the fire company. But also, you could have a fire in the kitchen, and all the smoke is going into the upholstered living room, where all your upholstered furniture is, drapes or whatever. And smoke, depending on the fabric, smoke can be unforgiving, and you can maybe not even ever get smoke out of certain fabrics. So that's an important coverage on your policy. It will cover smoke damage subject to the deductible and so forth. So yes.
Would it cover pets? Like say you have a cat or a dog or a bird, and your bird should check out due to the smoke inhalation? Or was that an entirely different policy?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
So you have a pet insurance.
So say I have a pet,
A pet?
and the pet dies due to the smoke.
Oh, a pet that
inhalation.
dies in the fire. That's not covered on your insurance policy, unfortunately, no.
No.
Is
Thank you.
insurance.
Well, there is such a thing as pet owner's insurance, and I tell you, I have a dog that's 13 years old, and when she was 5 months old, I bought pet insurance. And I'm here to tell you that girl has better health insurance than I do. And that is no joke, she really does. You want to see me afterwards, I'll tell you the name of the company. But I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that if my dog died in a fire, that pet insurance policy would cover that. Typically, pet insurance policy is for health. The dog dies or has a problem, or, dogs get cancer and other things just like people, and typically that's what those kinds of policies respond for. Yeah. 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 Yes, yes. If for some reason you're keeping a lot of money, write down your name and your address and tell me, first of all. And, but if you do keep a lot of money in your apartment, you want to have it protected. Some people have, collections. They have old money that they collect, a silver certificate or that kind of thing. I used to collect $2 bills until they started doing them again, and now, that collection is for the birds. But that kind of thing, you can schedule that. If you have stamps or coins, those kinds of things can be put on a floater.
Comic books.
What is it?
Comic books.
Yeah, comic books are a big one. They can be very valuable, yes, and the baseball cards is another thing.
Yes. So there's two things about when the federal regulators are finally doing something. They're basically going to two definitions. One is, I forget what it is, guys, you help me, it's like, it ain't good after this date. And the other is a Best Buy date. Best Buy is, because they have to put a date on it, is what it is. So even if something's past the Best Buy date, use by date, it still reasonably should be good.
We do stacks in our disaster kit that we pass out at fire scenes. And so inevitably at a big fire, someone will look at the cookies and go, the Best Buy date was a week ago. And then I have to send an email out to everyone and go, the Best Buy date is just the date that says that's where they're going to guarantee the freshness, it's okay. So internally, I add 90 days on just to keep people happy. So the Best Buy, use by date are just the date that they have to put on. Now, if it says a use by date, that means it's really not good. And generally that's for a perishable. It's like for milk, eggs, meat, cheese. Fruit you can pretty much tell by the way it looks, but so that's the difference. Canned beans or just yeah. And so at that point you're making your own decision how far you want to push out that margin. Yeah, and like I said, hot sauce makes everything taste good and fresh.
I also have one thing to say too. DC has a program, it's called CERT. It's usually given by HCMA. CERT is nothing more than Community Emergency Response Training. Now, what it does is usually a 2-day course. What we're talking about, whether it's a short-term or a long-term, a short-term kit or a long-term kit, it goes into further detail and it walks you into the things you should do. It talks you into the things you should do. So now you become, in essence, a prepared awareness type person. And it opens up your mind to say, hey, look, something could happen, another 9/11. Question I'm going to ask you, does anyone know what their main emergency evacuation routes are? I got 2 in the back. Do you know what they look like?
Basically,
No, yes, it's leave town, but there are certain streets that's telling you, but the average person does not even know what that little blue marker on top of your street sign is. Guess what, folks? That is your evacuation route. If you see it, that's your evacuation route. But a lot of people don't pay attention to that. Trust me, I'm not trying to preach doom. I'm not trying to preach in case of the apocalypse tomorrow from the zombies or from the government or
Hey, FEMA got
whomever.
in trouble for that.
I'm not trying to preach that. I'm just trying to make you guys aware that something could happen. It might happen. How many of us ever thought that there was ever going to be an earthquake before, 5 years ago? Okay?
not here.
If someone would have said, hey, get earthquake insurance, you would have said, yeah, right. Okay? Can you imagine if you would have had earthquake insurance and you would have said, oh, guess what? I can cash in my policy now.
As you watch your tire not fall off the can.
Yes. So those are things that we're here just to tell you, hey, it could happen, it might happen. If it does happen, these are things that you should be able to do.
The importance of the signage, not so much on, gee, there's going to be a bomb drop, in which case,
Oh, well, bye.
that's something else. But, let's say you're down in the Carolinas, say, let's say Kitty Hawk, and, while there's not a lot of choices, it's helpful to know which way to go, and they'll have the signage, and you'll notice that, oh, must be a mandatory evacuation, because everybody's headed north that way. Yeah. And, they should be aware that probably not be going to the south.
That's just basically the road that should be taken out.
Get you out of DC.
Because remember, you don't want to come into DC. You want to get far, far away from DC to higher grounds, safer grounds, what have you. But a lot of people don't ever pay attention to that. Trust me, until I took that course, I did not know what those little blue markers were on top of my street light. I mean, my markers.
But here's the interesting thing, DC practices that 5 days a week. It's called the evening rush hour. It is the
Exactly.
major routes going out of town.
To provide a practical answer on the evacuation route, I was living in Orlando, Florida,
Yeah.
and the evacuation route pointed towards Daytona Beach. If you're in Daytona Beach, it points you towards Orlando. So you really need to ask yourself, what is it I'm trying to protect myself from? Is it weather phenomenon? Is it an attack of some sort? Is it some sort of contaminant, like red tide? And not that that's hugely contagious, but yeah, it can be harmful. So you have to ask yourself in advance, what happens if some of these bad news scenarios were to take place? I was down at the Coconut Grove Library in Dade County, and when I came out, I noticed everybody's looking in my direction, and I knew it wasn't the old beat-up car I had. I looked in the rear 3 tornadoes touching down. So I headed out to the Everglades, which is based on a grid system, so that I figured the further I get away from the water area, the more land I have between the shore and myself, probably the safer I'll be. And that was true. I got it.
Question. Have you all heard about the big fire that took place here? Have all the papers?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
It's all senior buildings.
Yes.
And many seniors weren't able, have not yet been able to get back into that building to get vital passports, IDs. And there are many valuable people who had careers based on what they do. Now, the fire started on the top floor, and now I understand because of the water, because the water went on for like, fire went on for 3 days. It sounds like arson or some plan of burning. And now all these seniors are being housed as if they are refugees at the Greenleaf Community Center in Southeast.
Right.
Okay, not been able to get in yet, and I think this is a major issue that needs to be dealt with, to look at, because it's like Katrina all over again. Now, this time it's not war, it's fire. And these people have lost everything. They've been housed in hotels right here in D.C. Can't get their passports, their medical equipment, their medical, medicine, nothing. And it's a travesty because it looks like, city council is looking at everything else but that.
That is,
The building has been attacked before, when people were forced out, and they said, okay, once they tore it down, remodeled it, they said, these people who left to come back in, they only a handful of them came back in.
yeah. Well, that would be, yeah, that is something their office is working closely with these tenants, because we have the OTA, Office of the Tenant Advocate. We are coordinating the emergency housing program for this specific issue, together with the Red Cross, and
So I just want to join in. I've done this work for 36 years. This is not a political endorsement, but I've done this work for 36 years. The level of support, I'm not saying everything is perfect, but the level of support that the District of Columbia government and voluntary agencies has provided is amazing. You're right, they were in the Greenleaf Rec Center for an evening. The city has, since OTA has been doing a yeoman's job, putting people in hotels, getting them in good locations. The District of Columbia government, because it is a state, has waived many of the regulations to reissue medical items, things of that nature. Everyone has a case manager that's going to work with them. And then there's a subset of the District of DC government that's going to work on the relocation process. So yes, a bad disaster, horrible disaster, but 36 years, the way the District of Columbia government has pulled everyone to the table to work on this speaks volume to the leadership and the employees of the district. We have a phone call every morning at 8 o'clock. Weekend we get to sleep in the 9, where we talk about what are we doing for everyone. So I just wanted to add that the city, not perfect, but
no, but we're still working on it. And I want to thank everyone to be present today, but we just were informed that our time is up. And I want to thank the panelists, and definitely we should give them an applause. Thank you very much, everyone.
pleasure seeing you again.
Likewise, Paul.
Thank you. Likewise.